I do believe. I do believe, Lord, help my unbelief. That's one of the most reusable lines, I think, for our prayer that comes from the Gospels. Many people, I'm sure, through the years have found it easy to identify with the sentiments of the man in this morning's Gospel and his prayer. I do believe, but Lord, help my unbelief. As we hear, the man's son was under the control of what's called a mute spirit in the Gospel. I'm certain that his father was just simply beside himself with frustration. And so out of compassion and love for his son, he comes to Jesus. And that coming to Jesus is itself, I think, a sign of the man's faith. It is itself a prayer. But he acknowledges at the same time that his faith is small, that it's weak. There was unbelief mixed in there with faith. I'm sure that sounds familiar to you. It does to me. Perhaps that's where many of us find ourselves from time to time. Our faith can kind of take a knock, especially with some great trial that we face or a disappointment in life along the way. We can find it difficult to reconcile our faith in the Lord Jesus with the experiences of the crosses that we find in life. Our faith can be put to the test when we struggle sometimes with the darker side of life. Jesus' own faith was put to the test when he walked into his passion as he hung upon the cross. But he faced that test by crying out in prayer. He prayed out of that testing experience, out of the depths of his spirit. Jesus cried out to his Father. The gospel writers give us his prayer in the Garden of Gethsemane and his prayer from the cross as begging the Father to be with him. When our faith is put to the test, we need to pray all the more and cry out in the same way to our Father in heaven. To pray in a way that gives expression to the struggle that we're experiencing. When our faith seems weak, we need to keep praying out of our weakness, out of our less than significant faith, like the Father in the gospel today. When the disciples asked Jesus why they themselves could not drive the demon out, Jesus replied, "This kind can only be driven out by prayer." Now, you know as well as I do that God helps those who help themselves. But Jesus seems to be indicating that there are some situations in life that only God can resolve, that we, left to ourselves, cannot face. All we can do is pray. The disciples did their best to heal their boy, but their efforts were never going to be enough. And sometimes our efforts are not enough. And all we can do is give whatever situation in life that we're facing, we can only give that to the Lord in prayer. And I believe that Jesus is suggesting to us today that sometimes prayer can accomplish something that our efforts never will. In a similar way, as we continue to read, as Kelsey did today from the letter of James, we learn that there's a certain kind of wisdom that only comes from above. It cannot just come to us. We need to open ourselves up in prayer for it. The father of the boy in the gospel today offered a marvelously honest but humble prayer to the Lord Jesus, a prayer that many people have identified with. I do believe, Lord. Help my unbelief. He recognized the truth of what Jesus then went on to say, that all we can do sometimes in some situations is to pray. Lord Jesus, who comes to us today on the altar, Lord Jesus, we trust in you. Lord Jesus, help our unbelief.